Well, I'm pleased to say it's the interview with Ian Falloon that I've been promising you all for a long time. And welcome, Ian. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us all.
Oh, thank you. I'm pleased to help you. So that's all good. Thanks.
Excellent. Yeah. Now, in case you don't know Ian Falloon, he's written over 50 books on motorcycles. Many of them on the Ducati mark. You've written books about the Triumphs, Moto Guzzis, BMWs, all sorts. But you've written more books about Ducati than I think anybody alive, haven't you?
Probably, yeah. Probably on Ducati I've written more, yes, yeah.
Now, as a bit of background, can you tell us a bit about yourself? Because originally you were born in New Zealand, weren't you?
I was. I come from New Zealand, and I got into Ducatis over there, and what happened was that I was playing in a symphony orchestra, but I didn't have a lot of hours, so I used to work for the distributor part-time as another job, the Ducati distributor. So I had access to a lot of information and factory information, and it all went from there. So, and I still get that information. So,
what instrument did you play?
I played the oboe, and then I came to Australia. The orchestra's folded, so I came to Australia in 1979, and I played in orchestras here. But ultimately, I had a motorcycle accident that ended that career. And so I got into writing for magazines, and eventually books. Yeah. So that's how it all started. Yeah.
And when did your relationship with the Ducati Factory start?
Oh, it started in about 1973. That's when I started going to the factory for this distributor. He didn't want to travel overseas, so he used to send me to the factory once a year.
And you got to know a lot of people at the factory, didn't you?
I did. A lot of people. None of them are alive anymore, but I knew everybody in the old days. Yeah. So, and I knew Taglioni pretty well. I went to his house many times, and yeah, all those old guys, I knew them quite well.
And Taglioni designed the round case motor, didn't he?
He designed all the Ducatis until 1985 or so, until the 851. He designed everything before that.
It was a masterpiece of engineering, and I've seen that sketch. It's been around a lot. His very first sketch.
That's right. Yeah. Well, he was fortunate that Ducati was owned by the government. The government control. They just didn't have any budget. They let them do what they wanted. They just wrote off the debt every year. And at the time they made the 750, they didn't care what it cost to make, basically. So that's why they made this really expensive engine, because they were allowed to, but they were never profitable. It was never going to last. So, and it didn't last, of course. So, but we have it now. We're lucky to have them now.
Those round cases at the time were subsidized by the Italian government.
That's right. Yeah. All the Ducatis were subsidized by the Italian government until 1985 when Cagiva took over. Even all the bevel bikes were all subsidized. They're all too expensive to manufacture. But the round case was particularly expensive because it took 2 days to put an engine together.
Yeah.
So
we rebuild them, and it takes a long time now because it's very different when you're putting together a motor that's already been together. You're not dealing with something that's 100% brand new.
No.
You have to figure out ways around it. So we spend usually about a week putting one of those together.
It took the factory. Of course, they had everything, and they knew what they were doing because it was a production line. But it was a 2-day job to do a round case engine from ground up.
And how long did it take for them to build a square case motor?
Oh, much less, because with the square case they got rid of all that the bevel gears at the bottom, which is the most time-consuming aspect, because at the bottom you've got the bevel gears, and every gear affects the relationship of the ones above it. So, so nothing is independent. So you've got to start at the bottom, and you've got to pull things out and jiggle them around. And but with the square case, well, the problem with the round case also that you've got a bevel gear on the crankshaft, and because of that, any crankshaft end float affects all the valve timing.
Yeah.
So you have to shim the crankshaft for not for end float, but for you've actually got to shim them tight so that they will, when the engine cases expand, you'll have zero end float. So you've got to preload the crankshaft. So and it's not an easy operation.
And it doesn't it's starting either, because you've got a whole load of friction when you're trying to start the thing.
That's right, exactly. But when it's warm, it's meant it has to have zero end flow. With the square case, you've got a straight cut gear on the end of the crankshaft. And so the end float doesn't affect the cam drive at all. And then you've got the outrigger that holds the bevel gears, and they're locked in place, basically, and they're independent. So you shim one gear and you shim another, and then you shim the top. It takes maybe a quarter of the time to do a square case engine.
So they're about half a day to build new. That's still a long time to build a motor in a factory, half a day.
These are expensive engines. These bevel engines are expensive engines to manufacture. That's why cars haven't used them since the 1930s. Cars haven't used bevel drive camshafts since the 1930s because they were just too expensive.
And that was the Bugattis mostly, wasn't it?
And Bentley 3 litres going up. All the Bentleys have got bevel drive overhead cams, and the Bugattis. In fact, it's more like a 1920s thing. The bevel. It's more 1920s. 1930s they went to straight cut gears for the cars, like the MV Agusta.
Yeah. And that's a great way to operate the camshafts. And
well, this is why the racing engines, the Desmo Sedici racing engines, use straight cut gears. All the Hondas,
the 30 and 30.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most accurate and precise method. That's why they use them. But it's not cheap.
No, and it means that they can rev a lot higher.
That's right, and they have accurate. There's no inaccuracies with camshafts, chains floating and belts and all sort of stuff. So it's just a direct system.
And the bevel as well allowed the V-twin Ducati to rev that much higher. I mean, some of them go to 8,500 the round cases, don't they?
No, the 750s went to 9.2 at Imola.
Wow.
And they were revving to 9,200. They had desmodromic, valves and stuff, so they didn't have valve flow. But was quite a high revs for a V-twin back in those days. Yeah, so
when a Vincent Black Shadow would rev to, I think it was about 4,500, 5,000.
It's a different sort of engine. The bevel drive Ducati twin came out of the singles, which were high revving, single cylinder racing engines, and they just put two of them together, and so it's basically what it is. This is but it's still technology from an earlier era. It was built in 1971, but the 750 Ducati, but it's 1930s technology, really.
For the time, it was incredibly effective.
Oh, absolutely.
Well,
and still effective.
Yeah.
Still effective. Yeah.
When they're built and set up right, they're really reliable.
Oh, they are. They are very reliable. Yeah, as long as you operate within the parameters that they were designed for.
Yes.
They're very reliable. Yeah.
Yeah,
they're not Harleys, Ducatis. You can't lug them around at 1,500 RPM and give them full throttle. That's not what you do. You know, if you're prepared to rev them and warm them up properly and rev them, keep the engine spinning, they're very reliable.
The GT 750.
Yeah,
but it's a lot more torquey than the green frame and the Sport, which are they're demanding to be got up near the red, you know. But also you don't want to take too far into it.
They're quite similar, really. The engines aren't that different. It's just mainly compression and carburetor size, you know. So, but they're all quite similar apart from that.
Yeah. But it's a beautiful bike to ride. They don't sort of feel peaky in any way, where like some of the Japanese bikes, you've really got to thrash them to encourage them.
Oh, they're a different sort of engine.
Yeah.
It's a torquey engine rather than
that power's coming from just throughout the whole rev range, and it's not demanding to be revved.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful, beautiful motor. I love riding them, and
they're very smooth. That's the other thing about the Ducati.
Yeah.
But there's no balance shafts or anything, but it's really smooth. And
was that to do with Taglioni said he wanted the crankshaft as close, on the same line as the wheel spring? Is that why?
That's more of a philosophical thing, but the smoothest comes from the 90-degree engine and a narrow crankshaft, so there's no rocking couple particularly in it. And the other thing about these engines, which is different to later Ducatis, because they rotate backwards, like modern MotoGP bikes. Actually, they were way ahead of their time in rotating backwards. When they went to the Panta, they rotate forwards. And they're a buzzier engine. They don't have that loping feel that the bevel engines have. Yeah,
they really demand to be ridden hard.
Yeah.
And the handling's phenomenal on them. I think it's one of the best handling 600s I've ridden. I love that Panta.
Yeah.
Ian, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you as always. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you from everybody who's seeing this interview, because I've been asked to do it again and again, and we finally got there. So thank you very much for your time. And there will be further interviews in the future. So keep watching this space. And thanks a lot.
Well, thank you, Paul. It's been a pleasure. We'll do it again.